article I wrote on LinkedIn. It says, the best technical skills in the world are a waste of time if you don't have a non-technical capability.
Lou Adler, thank you so much for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders.
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you very much, Michael.
Really, really happy to have you here. Best-selling author on Amazon, the essential guide to hiring, and hire with your head, and really a world expert on what it means to do intelligent hiring and getting hired and performance-based hiring. Lou, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how did you even get sucked into this incredible industry of thinking about hiring?
Well, that's actually a good question. It's really good for engineers too, because my background is an engineer. If you look at my background, guidance
Okay.
and control systems, got an MBA in finance and accounting, then started working in manufacturing, logistics, cost accounting, budgeting, planning, host of different things, aerospace, uh, handheld consumer electronics and automotive, and the whole bit. And the only reason I was running a manufacturing company was 40 years ago. Hated the boss. I mean, I get pissed off every other week when he came down. He and I just argued, and I quit every other week. I quit for a
Wow.
year. Finally quit. Decided to become a recruiter. And this is the interesting thing is, as an engineering person, especially with manufacturing background, I could see the hiring process was just like making parts. I didn't care if it was automotive parts, a rocket ship, because I worked on guidance systems.
In terms of the assembly line?
It was automotive components. It's just, you have to manage yields. You have to understand what's the product. You have to have a design spec. You have to have a manufacturing process. And you have to manage it every step of the way, from concept, from even how you procure parts, to final inspection in between. Most people in hiring don't see it that way. My background as a systems engineer made it a little bit easier, particularly in finance and accounting, because I said, hey, it's more than just making parts. You have to control the cost. You have to influence people. So very unusual background for hiring. And then I was also a recruiter. I'm probably a recruiter because I was in college. Part of a fraternity. I was the recruiting guy.
Of course.
That's all I did. So it's like I was designed to be a recruiting person.
I love it. Lou, why is recruiting hard? Why is hiring and getting hired a puzzle that confuses everybody?
Well, it is a puzzle. It's a great question. The puzzle is because it's multidimensional. It's not one-dimensional, two-dimensional, three. It's actually 5 or 6 dimensions. And just getting one dimension right is hard. On top of that, you got human nature, which is one of the dimensions. People make decisions. Candidates get nervous. Hiring managers don't know what they're looking for.
Right.
HR overwhelms them with cost and budgets and compliance issues that don't help. People think that the best people are just going to apply to a job posting and go through the demeaning process. You got all these variables that impact the decision itself.
Right.
And now you got all the kids going to school, getting engineering degrees. I know for a fact you're not going to make the decision alone. You get an offer. You're going to ask your friends and family, hey, is this a good job? And if you're getting paid 5% less, people, you're not taking that stupid job, are you, Michael? I mean, there's all these stupid reasons that people take dumb decisions. But that's what happens. Now you get older, you make even dumber decisions. And then you make a bad decision, you suck it up, and you kiss ass, and all this stuff happens. And then if you get married, your wife says you got to make more money, so you take a stupid job because of more money, and all this stuff. That's why it's hard.
Right. And why do you call these dumb decisions? So what is it about these decisions that you don't consider them, intelligent or performance based?
Okay, so let me go back 35 years.
All right.
This is a true story. There was a guy named John Morgan. I had a job offer for him as a plant manager in an electronics manufacturing company. The company at the time was making high definition displays, at least at that time, and they were moving into the displays were really becoming unusual, liquid crystal and other stuff. I thought I had the job closed. It was a good job plan, probably in today's dollars, $20, probably $150 to $200K. I would have gotten a 30% fee for that, so good fee for me. He told me on Monday he was taking the offer. On Wednesday, he called me up and said, I'm not taking your offer. I got a better offer. And he told me why. He said, well, better title, closer to home, more money. I then said, well, tell me a little bit about it. And he told me the company, told me the compensation, told me everything about it. I said, John, you've just made a long-term strategic decision using short-term tactical information. That's a dumb, now I didn't say him that was a dumb decision. I was desperate. That's what I just came up with. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, everything you said is about what you got on the start date. Start date is a compensation. It was only like 3 to 5% more. It was the title of the job better than the one he had. The drive was 15 minutes closer. I said, John, what you do for the next 2 to 3 years will impact the rest of your life. You're going into an industry that declining, whatever it was, electronic assembly processes that were outdated. I said, you're going to be going into this industry in 3 to 5 years when you come out, you'll be no better than you are today. So you just put a lid in your career. On the other hand, if you go to this other job where they're putting state-of-the-art displays, they're going overseas, I know the title's a little bit less, but you're on putting yourself a better career trajectory.
But how can you, and I'm looking
Let
at
me finish
myself.
the story.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
But it's a good story. He calls me the next day, says, I'm taking your offer. 9 months later, he calls me back and said, Lou, best decision I ever made, best thing you've ever said to me about making a strategic career decision. I've now been made VP operations. We're making 3 plants in China. This is when China was expanding. The idea of you have to make career decisions, not day one decisions. So focus on decision-making is what you're gonna be doing in year 1 and beyond, not what you get on the start date. And all the people who advise you will be focusing on the start date. What's your comp, what's your title, is it cool, is it this and that? That's the dumb decision, and all your advisors will focus on the dumb decision stuff, not the long-term career decision. And that's, if I had any message to say, is focus on what you're gonna be doing and becoming, not what you get on the start date.
I think that's incredible. I was just taking a fascinating class at the Stanford Business School with Professor Demarest. He was the head of communications for George Bush Sr. During his presidency, and the whole class was about how strategy equals context, and how when you're approaching a decision and you have the facts on the sheet of paper, it seems like an easy decision, but you're missing the most important factor, which is the context of the decision. And what you're describing is exactly the same thing, where you're thinking the context is the career. It's not this moment of time and how much you're going to get today.
Well, let me give you another story, because that's what I do. When you're my age, you tell stories.
I love stories, yes.
Well, I have an MBA from UCLA. My first year, I became a financial analyst. I also had an engineering degree, and I was at the corporate headquarters of the 35th largest company in the country. All I was doing was showing the slides. That's all I was doing. I was in an operations review meeting. The group president was there, chairman of the company, the CFO. Now, this is big, and I was nervous as heck. I was like 25, so nervous. I didn't even want to say a word. I was even nervous flipping the slides. That's what they did that day. I mean, I was so nervous being in front of all these powerful people. The CFO of this corporation had a group president. It was probably a $3 billion group. And the CFO of the parent company said to this group president, he said, strategy drives tactics. And I don't care how good the tactics you are, your strategy sucks. Get the fuck out of this room and come back with a good strategy, because you're wasting everybody's time.
Wow.
And this was, man, I'm sitting here 25 years old and hearing this comment to a group president, and I was just blown away. But it's driven, that was the idea of, boy, strategy. If you don't have the wrong strategy, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to waste your time. Now I go back to hiring. I believe too many people have the wrong talent strategy. They feel they can weed out the weak rather than attract the best. And when you attract the best, you have to nurture them. You have to spend more time with people. They have to understand the job requirements. When you weed out the weak, they got to go through a funnel and an automated impersonal funnel and endure the inhumanity of applying for a job and then not being told and all this other stuff. So it's the fundamental attract-in strategy versus a weed-out the weak strategy. So at the corporate level, it's a strategy problem. At the individual level, making a decision, it's also a strategy problem.
So then tangibly, looking at my generation, and let's look, for example, at the engineering demographic, people who are coming out of college with an engineering degree, and they're faced with an insurmountable number of opportunities, ranging from startups to corporates to financial institutions. And how do you go about making a decision for yourself, and how and then I'd like to flip the conversation on how does a hiring manager can look at a 22-year-old candidate and determine whether they will be a good fit for their company with no previous experiences.
Well, that's a great question, and so I'm going to give you my biased viewpoint.
Of course.
My first job as an engineer was in a big corporation. When I got my MBA, it was still at a big corporation. So I learned how big corporations functioned. I learned how engineers in big corporations function. And my first manager, he was a cool manager, and it was an aerospace company, and it was a systems engineer for a nuclear missile program. And he said, I don't want you to do any work. He was 22 years old. I don't want you to do any work. I want you to answer these two questions. And he said, why does E equals MC squared? And why can't you push on a rope? I said, well, I don't need to go to the meeting, but I know the answer to both of those questions. He said, no, you don't know the answer. That's why you have to, I want you to meet everybody in the company, and I'll take you out to lunch on Thursday, and we'll discuss your answers on Thursday. So this was 4 days. All he said, all I want you to do is talk to everybody and get the answers to those two questions.
Wow.
Well, the idea that I got was that at a big company, and you have to have a good manager. So if you don't have a good manager, it's kind of, you're going to lose. So I always had good managers and mentors, so they helped you. But the idea was the technology for engineers, yeah, that's important. But you can't convince other people of it by proving it technology. You have to influence them using different set of skills. I don't want to call them soft skills or non-technical skills. How do you convince somebody who has a point of view that's not the same as what your point of view is, that skill? And that's what I learned. I mean, I didn't learn it. I understood it by the fourth day on the job, because he met me meet everybody. It was 35 engineers.
Wow.
So it was kind of interesting. Now let me kind of say that story again, because this is as important of making a choice. I took this job. I was going to engineering school upstate New York. I took the job in Southern California because on March of 1968, when I got my engineering degree, upstate New York, it was snowing. I get a call from a company in Southern California. It was Vietnam. He said, Lou, I'd like to make you an offer. No interview. I'd like to make you an offer. I was a pretty good engineer. I said, what's the weather? That was the first question. What's the weather? 72 degrees. I said, well, you get deferment. He said, absolutely. You're going to work on a nuclear guidance program for a Minuteman missile. I said, well, I get any relocation? He said, yes. And I had no money. How much? 15 or 18 cents a mile. I said, when do I get that money? He said, the day after you start. I said, I'll take that offer. I mean, this was not real rocket science offer. But this was interesting. When I got there, and these were brilliant people working on how to place a nuclear missile using 1968 technology within 100 yards of downtown, the enemy, Moscow, in this case. Sorry for anybody in Russia, but that's what the plan was. And they could do it. The guys hated the job. I thought it was pretty cool. 22 was pretty cool. Yeah. I said, why? And as I got to know them over the course of a year, they had all worked on a lunar landing project, all of them. And they said, wow, we went 5 years, 24/7, doing exactly the same work, but because the mission was important, they went all out.
Wow.
So the work itself is important. The team you're working with is important, but the mission is just as important. If you're doing something that's important, not just for you, but for something else, you just get totally motivated. It's not work. It's just an exciting venture. That job was not an exciting venture for me. I've had others that were, but if you can get the mission right, boy, you're in the game. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but
no, 100%. And now, looking over the years, as you're becoming more of an expert of hiring, and you're seeing all these different case studies, and you're part of these case studies, do you observe any different trends in the young demographic on how we make decisions on which companies we join or what career paths we take? Are there shifts through generations?
Yeah, I think that they definitely are. So, and this is the problem. I don't think human nature. I talk to guys, not necessarily your age, but certainly young people frequently, and mid-level people and older people. I have not seen a change in human nature as a result of all what's going on here. Mm-hmm. Smart people are smart people. They were smart people 30, 40, 50 years ago. So that has not changed. What happened is the corporate world has changed a little bit. I think, so if I had to make advice, I'd say, now, if you could get to a place 1 to 2, 3 years where you really put on some kind of rotation program and really put in different series, that's invaluable. That just takes your education to another level, because now you're seeing how all these different functions work and how you learn how you can't push on a rope, and understanding that. And I call them the non-technical skills. And there's an article I wrote on LinkedIn. It says, the best technical skills in the world are a waste of time if you don't have a non-technical capability. And I basically say that people get hired for their technical skills, but they get fired for their lack, or they don't get promoted for the lack of ability to work with people, managing projects, keep budget, making commitments. And if you can't put both of them together, you're gonna be disappointed and wonder, why am I not getting ahead? Why is this not happening? It's the soft skills. I hate to call the word soft because they're too important. I'll call them non-technical skills. But it's that combination of both of them. If you get an opportunity to do both of them, you're in the game. If you don't get an opportunity, and I think a startup could be interesting, but you don't get the foundation of how to grow a company. And that's why I would be real concerned about a startup, pure startup. Because the executives don't know how to run a company, and you're going to be in there not knowing how to run a company. You're going to have it might be an interesting experience and a rocket ship ride, but you're not going to get the foundation you need.
So you mean worried about somebody who has no experience in the sort of the real world or the corporate world, running a startup and being an executive of day one and being a leader of day one, not having experienced some of these ropes themselves. But Lou, I also want to transfer the conversation also to hopefully one day, sooner rather than later, when I have my own venture and I will hire people and I will need to know what people do I hire, and I will have to make some decisions. What are the key things that I should keep in mind in performance-based hiring, as you've written in your books?
Okay, so here's it happened a conversation this morning with a head of research for a major search firm, one of the top 3 search firms in the world. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about diversity hiring. How do you really hire diverse talent? And I said, basically, it's at the job description level. And I'm going to go back to my first search assignment, which was 42 years ago. I knew the president of the company was making automotive components, and no job description, no list, but he did have a rough. I needed someone with probably 10 years experience and a degree of this way and this kind of background. I said, Mike, that's not a job description. Right. That's a person description. A job doesn't have experience. A job doesn't have skills. A person has that. Let's put the job description in the parking lot. What does the person need to do to be successful? I asked that question. He said, we got to turn around the plant. I said, fine, let's walk through the plant. Spend an hour walking through the plant. Labor problems, logistics problems, warehousing problems, manufacturing process problems, lack of control, no quality control. I mean, it was just a terrible plant. I'm looking at material all over the plant floor. I said, this is a terrible plant. We'll get someone to fix it. That was my first placement. I have never used a job description listing skills experience since then. I always ask the hiring manager, what does the person need to do to be successful? 5 or 6 performance objectives, build a team of accountants to launch a new product, work with marketing and product management to develop a new system that does A, B, and C, put together a product roadmap for the next 3 years based on industry trends. It's stuff that people need to do. So if you don't know that, how can you possibly assess a person? When I interview candidates, I say, hey, one of the big things we have to do is put a product roadmap together that looks at this series of economic considerations. Have you ever done something like that? Walk me through it. So what I do is I define the jobs, a series of performance objectives, and I ask candidates to tell me about work they've done that's most similar. And I look at the people who have done the most comparable work. It doesn't have to be identical, just comparable in decision-making, complexity, design, team, collaborative skills. So, and then I'm in the game. That opens a pool to everybody. And I tell job candidates the same thing.
And is it still as relevant today when, especially engineers joining, young companies, the roles, while they may be defined in the beginning, they change very critically and sporadically over time. So is that a method of hiring for a specific performance type, is that still relevant to the very new?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. I look for people. They said, Michael, tell me about your biggest project you had at this company. How did that change over time? How did you deal with that change? What was the biggest problem you faced? What was the biggest gap you had to fill? Walk me through those things. So I'm looking for the ability to not only do the work, but also to handle bigger projects. I want to understand how you did it. So absolutely. You just got to understand the environment. 100%. On the other hand, in the pace, and I look at company culture, the biggest proxy is rate of change. I mean, if you've never been through a rapid change, Like when I was in aerospace, it was like pushing on molasses, nothing would change. I've been at fast-paced companies. I was the first handheld calculator company. That was every day we changed. It was more fun, and that had to be my best real-time job, was working as in the first handheld calculator. I might even have one here.
100%.
Just to give you guys a sense of what a handheld calculator was in 1972. 8K chip, 8K chip. All it could do is multiply, add, and subtract. Couldn't divide because it didn't know how to round off.
Oh my
could
God.
Not divide. We got to 16K, it could divide, but it didn't get the right end. It couldn't round off. Had to get to 32. I mean, it was pretty bad, but it was fun. It was, you know, I was in a chip factory looking at them, buying them, and it was fun, but it was weird. Different world, but same problems.
Lou, just fascinating. Thank you again for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Before we leave, I have to ask you for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Well, you actually asked me that at the beginning of this, and I wasn't supposed to say, but I'm actually a pain in the ass, so that's maybe 4 words. But the point being is, don't accept conventional wisdom. If you're, and that's why it's hard, because you have so many competing objectives. So if it's a candidate, you as a candidate, you get into an interview, you just got to ask the manager, hey, before we get into my background in general, can you just tell me a couple of things you need to get done in this job? I'd like to give you examples of work that I've done that might be most related. So now you're talking about some real important stuff. You just got to push the envelope and not just accept the fact that I guarantee 99% of the people who will interview you don't know what they're doing. So you got to take responsibility to be interviewed accurately yourself and make sure that job is the right one for you and make the decision based on where you're going, not where you've been.
I think
that's helpful. Thanks, Michael.
I think that's extremely relevant to everything that you know that my friends and I are going through, and thank you for the advice. Thank you for your time. Lou, have a great day and stay safe and stay healthy.
Good. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.